Welcome everybody, and we'll have a pleasant evening starting with today's session with Akash. So allow me to introduce Akash today. Akash is an experienced designer and researcher based out of Bangalore, Pune, India. He's done his bachelor's of information engineering from PESIT Bangalore, and then interestingly, he went on to do his master's in interaction design from National Institute of Design. That's a very classic combination for a very successful user experience designers across the board. He's an ex-urban fellow from Indian Institute of Human Settlements. His interest started with intersection of tech and society through design and research. And he's been involved so far in all his career for personal finance tools at Quicken, hyperlocal e-commerce, informal employment at Dunzo. He currently works at Microsoft as a design researcher, and you can get more information about him on his website at akashchandan.com. So, Akash, over to you for a very interactive session on anecdotal user research.
Hi, Chaitali. Thanks a lot. It's really great pleasure to meet you. And yesterday's talks were awesome. So I'm really looking forward to the upcoming talks here at the festival. Thanks a lot for a warm welcome.
Most welcome. We are looking forward to hearing from you today. It's a very interesting topic, I must say.
Something that I put together, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with the community, though.
Sure.
So should I start?
Definitely. Please go ahead.
So yeah, as I mentioned, these are my kind of personal, contextual, collective opinions, observations, and experience and learnings over the time that I've spent in my academic work, at my product related design, like when I work for product companies work, and I've worked in, as Chaitali mentioned, I worked in a legacy product, which was almost 25, 30 years old, which is a complete desktop product. At the same time, I've been recently worked with a hyper growth startup also. So I'm going to share most of my learnings as my anecdotal stories, and we'll jump right into it. As I mentioned, I just to give a brief intro of my work so that everyone kind of connects the dots in the further presentation. So one of my master's thesis was designing a security camera, and it was for a startup. And this was before WhatsApp came up with the video calling. And when I framed the inquiry as designing a sense of security and privacy for Indian homes, which opened up so many avenues to understand the contextual concerns or contextual perspectives of Indian homes and surveillance itself. And then I continued my work at Quicken, where I personal finance management tools for small businessmen, business owners, which was mostly remote work. And this was a great learning because most of my work was remote research. And then I shifted my interest towards social studies, which I always wanted to get more in depth with. So I took up a fellowship in form of urban studies, which Chaitali mentioned, at Indian Institute of Human Settlements, where I got really interested in gig economy, platform economy, or which is mainly technology-based job, or what you call it, technocratic development, in a way, where my project was in understanding the informality in the city, intracity logistics of tempos and trucks, which I really kind of looked at it from an academic approach. I had the skill set to look at the same problem from an industry approach, where I pursued my interest at Dunzo, where I looked at the hyperlocal delivery, where I worked very closely with partners. Currently, I'm at Microsoft exploring insights at the workplace for better work-life balance. So, anecdote. It's a short narrative. It's like a very small, interesting, amusing, small bit of a story, right? And it's. I want to explore this thought of how do stories play such major role in product thinking, and why we should be more open to listening to them. We should be more willing to kind of understand where they're coming from and what they are. And overall, I think stories are how humans and people communicate, right? Everything is in form of stories. So when we look at experiences, and this is something that I keep reminding myself, experience are nothing but stories. And if you ask anyone what happened, what did you do, or how did you use this product. It's all going to come in form of stories, because that's how we converse, that's how we talk. So when I say experience of stories, and if I ask you what product did you use recently, and I start asking you more questions, it's going to be a lot of in a story format, right? To look at it, I think Play Store reviews. That's the first thing that I would do if I'm working on a project. Just go read, because it's just huge amount of collection of stories, and there are no data. There is no like quantitative charts there. It's all stories, and it's so many. It's people's how they're expressing and how they're writing and their emotions, their frustrations, or they're very happy with it. You got happy users, you got unhappy users, you got confused users, you got like frustrated users, and these are all like this bubbles of qualitative stories, right? And that's what experiences are. So let's jump right into what is a story, what is in a story, right? It's very important to know that how rich stories can be, because I always feel this stories are insights in its pure form. It needs processing, it needs to be applied different methods that we speak in research, which is like mixed methods, where you apply quantitative and qualitative methods to get insights out. But stories are so rich in data, and I would like to take an example and explain that to you all, which is looking at the situation, right? Like if a story has so many layers, right? And I've taken, let's say, 6 layers, and you look at context. Let's look at our own situations. We're all stuck at home. We need to we can't go to the market. We are depending on mostly Taiwan cities. Mostly there's a specific group of people who depend on food delivery or grocery delivery products, right? And so the situation is that you can't go home. You've got kids at home. You've got elderly at home. You don't want to be at risk. So, and when you dig deeper, why did they even enter the space to use a product, right? That gives you a context. And when you ask, why did you need this? Like, what is there to be done? And this is the task. This is the intent of the story. I needed this to be done. I needed food to be delivered. I needed my groceries to be delivered. And if you ask 5 whys and you go to the basic, and the example is pretty obvious, but when you're tackling a problem which is not obvious as this, the 5 why methods would give you the deeper intent of why they're doing this, right? And then you get choice. I looked at all the options, and I had all these products to look at. And as a user, you can look at a cost sensitive user, or you can look at a value sensitive or time sensitive. They have perception of each brand, each product. So they're aware of all the products that are there, all the options that are there, and they kind of look at all the options, they weigh it in their own terms, and they say, I use this product for this reason, which is what the company tries to figure it out, the USP, right? It's not the best product, it's not the best use case. It might be like the best, most relevant or most contextual solution, right? Because when someone chooses a product, it can be so many factors that they decided to go with that product. And that's what we want. We can dig deep into. We can actually ask why this product, right? And then this happened, which is the result, which most of the time happens as expected. But sometimes, let's say the result is not exactly what I expected as a user. And that's the last part, which is but I wanted this to happen, but this happened, which gives you another interesting inquiry of what made them think that this would happen, right? And at what part of your product or experience or communication, which made the users think, oh, this is what you should expect. As I'm trying to explain this structure, which I mean is, when you talk to users, when you get a story, you can add a lot of factors, you can dig deeper, you can double click on each of them, and you can get so much rich data. So why are stories so important? Yes, stories are there, you can collect them, you can decipher them, but why is it so important to listen to stories, right? And this is something that I would like to think in terms of product thinking. I've got 3-4 reasons, and I would like to share them, right? One is, I really feel this was one of the major point that I had to prioritize, and I put this first, which is product stories precedes or prevails its products. When I say your product stories go out in the market before your product. When I say users who have never used your product know your product by someone's explanation of your product, right? And that's how it spreads. If someone uses and then someone says that, I've used this product and this is how I used it, I got this problem solved, or this did not work, whatever the story is. So when you're knocking on user's door as phone, and it's the story that's already there, right? And that story is what sometimes motivates them to come and download the app. So that's why stories are important. When I mean, these are the examples that I've seen in my where I come from, and even in not even tier 2 cities, even in tier 1 cities, people who are still new to who were still new to, and there's still a lot of them who are new to e-commerce, still would say, quote this, that people got phones, people got stones instead of phones, and that news gets so spread so widely, and it's the product actually starts with a step behind, right? One step back, where the consumer doesn't trust the product or the service, and you have to not only convert the person, but you have to convince, and you have to make sure that it's not going to happen with them, which is a great barrier or a leap of faith that a user has to take. Another video of a delivery guy eating a food where it was meant to be delivered, and even though there's so many beautiful good things that these people do and save so many people's lives day to day, solving their problems, but things like this get spread, and the aspect of someone who's saying, like my mom or my one of my mama, who would say like, oh, you order, oh, that person would have had the food already and you're going to eat that. And it's a story, and how can you like change it, right? It's the believe in it, they've never used the product and they don't have that much of context or need of it, but the stories leave such strong footprint in someone's perception. And if you look at word of mouth, which is the best form of advertising, and that's why shouldn't you be listening to your product stories then, like, because what's happening outside about your products and what people are talking about, right? That's why it's important. Then another thing that I've seen and observed is stories guide your product. Like product gets directions. It could be in form of opportunities. It could be in form of research questions. It could be form of validations. It could be form of some assumptions that you've had. Few examples would be during this my work at Indian Institute of Human Settlements, the project that I mentioned, where I was talking to Intracity, the tempo truck drivers, and my goal was to just understand how does the ecosystem work, how their earnings look like, how is the whole economy of the thing look like, and why are startups are not tracking it the way that other companies have. What is the negotiation or the conversation between these players or the stakeholders? And a very interesting story came, and I started validating, started looking at, which is when a city grows, when there are a lot of people move into the city, and the drivers figured it out, or they used to get this orders or tasks, right? And this is mostly from the outer part of the city, which you can say most of the migrants or newcomers to the city are settling down. And another assumption was there from the drivers, which is like the natives are so loyal and they can speak the language, they would just walk to the stand and they would talk to us, we can negotiate and we make a deal. Whereas people who are not from Bangalore, people who are new to the city, they don't know the language and they kind of rely on these apps to book, and that's why we can't negotiate with them. And hence we come outskirts to do these jobs, how shifting work. And when they were waiting, waiting for orders, or when they were waiting for the customer, and all this time, they actually saw this opportunity where there's a lot of construction happens, right? Outskirts. So there's a lot of construction materials which needed to be moved. And sometimes even it's intra-district, or even for Bangalore, sometimes it was in Tamil Nadu also. So it kind of gave them a very opportunity or to earn more, because they've traveled from the center of the city to out, and they would like to earn a bit more money, and they started doing this, right? But if I was from a company who was doing tempos and trucks, or order this platform, if I went and asked, what, how can I design the product? What can we do that you can earn more? They might not be telling this, right? And the story is there and the opportunity is there, and it's clear. You have that context to see through this, and you can read between the lines. You can see an opportunity. The idea is that stories give you these kind of possibilities to think. Whereas if I would have gone with a focused goal of what would I do to, what should we do to make you earn more money, and this wouldn't have come as a output. Second example could be stories. Stories nurture empathy. I feel in a company where there are few people who are close to the users, right? Designers or researchers. But discovering this hidden behaviors or choices that users make and the things that they say, you actually get to know these people much closer, right? And it builds empathy. It makes you realize the life that they're living. It kind of puts you in their shoes. Another really interesting example was some delivery partners mentioned that they prefer working at night, and we see that in the data too, right? And we thought, like, we knew that the preference would be they get paid more because it's night and there is less traffic and the turnaround time is faster because people don't make them wait and they get order faster. Along with these, when I was just talking to them, why do you do this? And this really interesting insight came up, and it was like, because of the night and there is no harsh sunlight, the engine doesn't get really hot, which leads to less consumption of fuel, which is a major thing for that guy because he actually saves on petrol. And for us, we don't know what to do with this insight, but it's the interesting part is we actually understand how important it is for them to be efficient and how important it is to be smart like this, right? And to save as much as they can and to maximize their resources and time, which makes you realize that they are very serious about this. But what can I do with this feature? Like, what feature can I think of this insight? Sometimes it's not about a feature, it's just to know your users much better. Another thing that I've seen with places where I've worked and people I've spoken to, whenever there is a story of your product, as I mentioned, not everyone has this much of interaction with users, and people who have, the teams that have, should own this responsibility to share these stories back in the team or the company, where it kind of reflects purpose, what you're doing, how your work, day-to-day work, is making an impact in the world, or how it's making someone's life easier. And that is that's very integral. That's very integral to have that internal motivation to kind of excel at what you're doing, and you start caring about users because you can kind of connect to them at a deeper kind of level, right? And now let's go to the methods. Okay, now how do you seek these stories, right? Where do you ask? Who do you ask? How do you ask? So aspects like the other interesting thing that I would like to say here is the Margaret Mead, who's a very known anthropologist, who says this, which is very true, still true today. What people say and what people do and what they say they do are completely different things, right? And it's very important for you to know who to ask, how to ask, because everyone has their own stories, right? Everyone wants to portray themselves in their own way. So it takes you some time to ask the right questions to the right people. When I say how to ask, right, this is a very traditional thing in research, where start with an open-ended questions. Instead of asking why or where or when, just ask, can you tell me recently what happened, or how has this change impacted you? Or having open-ended discussions lead the story. The first part of the conversations open up stories, which is more resourceful as you go deeper into your research. How not to ask, and this is something that I've found myself in a lot of times, and I've seen people do this also, where when you're talking to someone, you set up time with a user and you're clear about a goal, you want to validate this feature, or you want to ideate this, you want to get feedback on this specific thing, right? And the person starts talking about something else, like, sir, this is fine, but this happened with me and I have this problem, and that day this happened and everything. And you focused on that thing, and you know that the time is a resource, and you want to keep, kind of bring that user back to this, and it makes sense. But sometimes actually felt where I got the right person for the wrong question. What I mean by it, if I had someday set up a research project for this question, and this person would be right, like, to know, but would I get this person at that time? Even if I get, would he remember all this insights or experience that he has gone through? So just being a bit flexible while you're talking to users, and if something comes up, if they want to share, let them share and listen to that, because you might have heard about it a lot. You might be working on it right now, but the person has got this team of someone from the firm or the company where he can share his experience. So he's going to be like, he or she's going to be very excited about it, right? So, lend a ear, listen. Um, who to ask? This is something that I've seen in a platform or an app. Mostly these days, there are two parties, right? There's a user one, there is a user two. Let's call it like a primary user and a secondary user. For specific tasks, the relationship changes. It's important to ask the right person who is not incentivized to say the things that you want to hear or he wants to say, or unbiased, to be honest. Or sometimes they just don't care about that answer because they don't care about portraying them because it's not about them. A few examples could be, if you want to understand, these are, as I said, my experiences and my thought questions, right? It's not projects that I worked on. What payment app works most of the time? And if you get 20 people who smoke, they go and pay, 20 people who buy groceries, and 10 people who buy nariyal pani, like you can look at all this context, right, on street, and you can collect them. And the kind of data you'll get, they use a lot of different apps. They're not going to remember that specific moment what happened with them. But the right person could be the vendor, right? Because he, in his idea, he has an idea which app works most because of his own experiences. He doesn't look at the data. He doesn't know the metrics that we look at, right? The success metrics or the error numbers or the MOUs, all that, right? But in his reality, he knows that app one works the most because I've seen it in my life. Now, that person could be a very resourceful person to talk to, right? Because he knows, he has encountered this situation more. Same way with what I've worked on, which is what sometimes users ask for this extra services, like they expect the partner to kind of negotiate for them or pick up another thing on the way. If you ask the users, like, what do you ask, they know that they're not supposed to ask, so they might not tell us all the things because we will look at them the way that, oh, these people ask extra. But the partners are going to be honest because they're like, sir, these are all the things that people ask us. At the same time, you can ask what partners asks for clarification, which if you ask a partner, like, what do you need help with, they're like, no, I don't need help with, I'm pretty good with everything. Or sometimes there is a blame game. There's like, oh, this person doesn't give me everything. But if you look at the question, the user might be a good person to ask because the person will say, these are all the things that I remember very specific that partner asked for, right? When I speak of where do you look for stories, there are multiple channels that you can look for your product stories. Some of them are like what I said, interviews, conversations, very focused field visits, observations. Then you have also, there are memes, there are social media platforms mentions about your product, and those are really interesting about your what your product's impact is in the world, right? Dinner conversations, party conversations. Then your customer facing team, who is closer to the team, they might know a lot, but they might not have that lens to look at that richness of the data. So they would be very resourceful. And as a place that I worked with, which is a very legacy product where we had a forum, and these were very loyal user base who have been using the product for decades. So they used to discuss a lot, and that was very insightful discussion. We could follow up with them. So creating a forum might work for you too. And there is this thing that I try, and I would like to share this with everyone today, which is a very simple technique. You can just Google. And as I mentioned, these are very contextual. There's something that I do it, and it kind of helps, which is how can you Google about your own product and realize what's happening. If you like make it a habit, or once in a day or once in a week, you just like seek what people are looking for, with help with your product. So there's a syntax to it, which is you've got a question board, and you've got a product name, and you've got a feature name. Now, when I say question, you look at why, where, how, what does, why not, where to, how to. When I say why, it's mostly the value. Why am I doing this? Why is it so costly? Then why should I use this? And sometimes it's, oh, why am I not able to do with this product, which is an opportunity. If you look at where, which is like, oh, where do I find it? Usability, or where is that gone? Where is this? Search, usability, navigation related inquiries. You get how, which is the mental model of how does this work? How can I do this? Which is kind of help, which is FAQs. You look at what, which is like a comparison. What exactly? Sometimes it's comprehension, which is to understand what it is, right? I'll take you through a few examples that I found, and please feel free to try this out yourself. So when I say opportunity value, you just ask why, which is a question, and the product name, which is Zoomcar. You get two things, which is so costly and not in Goa. So costly is a value thing a person wants to ask, and why not in Goa is an opportunity. And there are reasons behind it. The Goa, the drivers union in Goa doesn't really let the outsiders like Uber and Zoomcar come in, and there is the whole thing going on there. Things like, but as I said, why not in Goa can actually lead you to understand why is it not happening. Even if you don't work in Zoomcar, you kind of be curious to read that, right? And how Paytm is a product, and you use the word gold, it's like how to check, how to use, how to sell, how to convert, and these are all the things that user wants help with, and they're doing it, right? It's kind of listed based on popularity. You can do that, and this, as I said, you can't take it at its face value. You need to do your own research, but you get good research directions when you do this. How to practo, delete, use, join, cancel. Then you have where clear tags, where to add HRA, declare, add house, and there's so many things that people are looking for. And why do they look? When do they look? Right? They go to the website. They're not able to understand. They come and do this, right? So that flow you can look at, right? Where does it grow? Where does your product stops helping, and they kind of look up for help from the community. Another interesting thing is what actually comes up on the result, right? Apart from the SEO that the marketing team or the growth team does, what are the help articles look like? You can look at where Gmail archive folder, which is I still don't know. I actually want to do this. Where Gmail say file, where is my spam folder, and Outlook has where is the signature, which you can kind of understand. It's a very professional product. People want to add signature, and maybe they're new to Outlook. That's why they're looking at this. These are all assumptions, but you can follow. Why Uber credit card? Why can't I apply? Why won't my credit card work? And sometimes these are very trending. Like some days when your product fails, you see a surge of these things. Concepts like Facebook, which is understanding of its own structure. Like if you look at how Facebook passwords, this is very interesting. It'll take you to even hone your skills of being a researcher sometimes. Look at how to big basket, delete, sell. You see a lot of apps. People want to know how to delete the app, right? So why phone pay? And you can do this, right? But there's so many stories. How do you make sense of these? A simple example, or it's not a simple method, but a tip that I could say, and please follow this up later if you have questions, which is you theme them. You collect a lot of stories, you talk to people, you start theming them, you start writing, oh, I've got 42 stories or 42 mentions about comprehension. Sometimes a story can have two things, about a refund and about a technical issue that the person faced, right? Then this kind of gives you this idea of size of problems that you're looking at. This clearly needs a lot of in-depth research work, but just to give an idea for the product folks here, if they want to do this from qualitative side, this can be helpful. But there is this argument, it's just one user, right? Why would I care about so much? Which is my opinion, that this one user can be a celebrity, or one user can be an influencer, or could be your investors, right? And at the same time, they pay the same price as a normal layman, but still one user import, because you're looking at impact over occurrence. It might not occur a lot. Like deleting an app might not be a lot of people's time, a lot of people's preference, but it's very important to them, right? They want to do this. It takes a few more steps, but they want to do this. And at the same time, products also want to be that one product of competitions, right? Like I want to be the one product that people want to look for. And this takes that much commitment. You need to look at every user if you want to be this kind of product. Another experience that I've seen is stories brings teams together, and vice versa. Like how teams also bring stories together in this understanding of user. It's something that you should remember. Every meeting, every ship room, every feature discussion that you have, the only missing person in that room is the user. And how do you bring this person in it, right? And how do you bring this collective idea of a user? What I was mentioning, people like different teams have different access to users. And so
Akash?
Yes.
Akash, sorry to interrupt you. Chaitrali here. We need to wrap up in a few minutes so that we can
Sure.
have the remaining 10 minutes for question and answers from our
Sure.
audience.
Yeah, I'm
Okay?
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. No problem.
So having access to different user stories is important. So that kind of lies upon responsibility of these people to share it amongst everyone, so that this collective understanding, the shared understanding of users gets stronger, and that helps to take much more informed, better product decisions, right? The last point, which is story-led product thinking, and this is something that I've seen in my previous work experience in recent years, where when you start up a product, when you in the early days, you really care about users. You kind of start asking the genuine feedback, what's happening, not the NPS, not the app ratings, not the CSAT scores, but you really look at what is happening with users' life with the product, right? But as the company grows, you have to follow the metrics part, you have to follow the feature-driven path, where you have to start listening to. You might be start listening to the market or the competitors or the investors, but it makes sense. You have to do it for the growth, right? But the relationship between this genuine conversation, the conversation shouldn't be one-sided. So another thing that I've seen with big companies, where at that scale, these points might not really be useful, right? And they kind of help you bring back to the scale. So customer driven culture, where when companies talk of customer driven culture, it's mostly the um, when people sorry I'm when people speak about customer driven culture, it's starts with listening, which is not the what you want to listen, but what actually users want to say. And that's what I want to leave this talk with. Yes, I'm done by Chaitali.
Okay, I mean, so what we can do, Akash, is, we have about 8 questions from our audience, and we can go in the order that they were posted. And, then if there are more and if we have time, then, I have a few questions, but let's go through the audience ones first. So Neha, she's a PM at Hyperlocal, and her question is, what's the framework to decide if it's a new story or an enhancement in the product? What is that thin line?
Sometimes, as I mentioned, a story might be an experience, right? When you talk to users and it's coming from an experience as a feedback, could be an enhancement as a feature. Or the theming part that I said, right? If you've heard this kind of stories in a long time and you've started to see the patterns where people are talking about the same things, could be a very stronger need. So
Okay.
what I'm saying is to keep track of the stories that you listen to in a way, to kind of validate if it's happened before or if you encountered such stories in the past.
So you could also do it on a milestone basis. So if you had previous user stories which went out in milestone 1, and then you can take them up, and based on whatever you've heard as anecdotes or the stories that you've heard between your milestone 1 and milestone 2, you can like re-enhance them and put them up as new stories for milestone 2 basically.
Yeah.
So it becomes an enhancement of the product itself. So, all right. So the next question is, how do we go about stories of B2B products where the reliability index is low?
Yes. So this is something that I was thinking when I structured this, and most of it is focused on B2C, very kind of companies which are very focused on the market, like a B2C. B2B companies I've not worked on personally. As I mentioned, I think you have to have this kind of culture, or I don't know what to say, like continuous conversations, right? Like you just meet users once in a month or once in a quarter. You just like don't have any direction driven goal. You just chat, like, how is it, what's happening? And maybe that kind of conversations might help. As I said, I'm not worked on B2B, so I'm not sure.
All right. So Neha, probably you can send it offline to the panelists, and then maybe somebody can help you with that answer. So we have Archana who's saying, Akash, you're talking about true ethnographic exercise or thick data. As a UX researcher, I appreciate that, but do you face any challenges when you share these insights with the rest of your team, since the sample size is quite small? In other words, how to make the stories impactful?
As I said, the slide is just one user. One person said, and what should we do this, right? And I like as a researcher, you've spoken to that user, you understand that's such a strong problem, but you sometimes feel this lack of occurrence. Like you have this impactful problem, but you can't be kind of driven by your own gut. You need to look for enough data points, or conduct another like a parallel research, or just have these conversations in the research that you're doing to collect as much as you can to make a strong case. But I strongly say that if you get very involved with this and you have this few data points and you like try to make a case, it will not work. You need to look for more data.
You need more statistical
Yes.
significance, essentially. So the next one is from Digvijay Thakur. So stories are from how do you look at a product from the outside, the user's view, and how do you see your product from inside, the product engineering view. So we have two views here, the user view, which is outside, and a product engineering view, which is inside the organization. And how do you strike a balance between these two is what Digvijay would like to know.
This the first like an example that I can get is when we would do some design, in the office, just go to a engineer or a tester and just show this feature. What do you think, right? The thing is that everyone is in a problem solving mode, and they know the intricate details of how the product is built. They'll always try to solutionize. They'll always say either, oh, this I can do it this way, oh, this can't be done, but they'll never actually question why is it, or why should we do it. That's why it's very important to being a researcher or a designer, anyone who speaks to customer often, you have to put yourself as an outsider in the company few days. At some point of the day, you have to say that I don't work for this, I work for this people, and I don't want to be kind of biased by these discussions, and I'm an outsider. And that's something that has worked for me.
I think it ties also to the previous question from Archana, with the sample size. So you need to like strike a balance between the sample of users that you have and the sample of, the insiders that you have essentially. And or the stakeholders, one is like even if within the insiders you have stakeholders, influencers. So on both sides you need like a fair amount of sample size in order to strike that balance. I think it ties to what Archana was also asking.
And it's actually important because when you even bring the story and you want to get people on board with this, you need to actually understand what do they want to do with this, right? And also there are people who I've been through some situations where I saw it as a solution, but I don't have that much visibility to see how does that solution disrupts another part of the product.
Yeah.
So it's important to get that perspectives also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. So we have Nyati. We have a few minutes left, so we can go through the rest. So Nyati wants to know how to identify, as a user researcher, how do you identify whether the company will focus on user research practice or they're saying it only during the interview?
So,
My hands are actually in English, my hands are itching to write. So in this way, my hands are itching to answer, but it's your state. So go ahead.
it's a very interesting question. How do you figure out if the company really wants to invest in research? There's this Gilbert comic. I wish I could have shown. It says there's a research firm guy and he says we specialize in giving the answers that you want. So it's like, oh, are you sure? It's like, I'm guessing you want an S on it. So it's I don't know how do you look for a company? Has it have past records of decisions based on research? Maybe you can ask what was your previous a feature or a success metric that you built based out of research, or what have you validated something that you've built. Maybe you can ask, why did you do this, what was the reason, and if that sounds credible enough, maybe that's a show.
Yeah.
I want to know your answers. Yeah.
So, one is I agree with you that you should always ask them, can you show me some previous research, because sometimes it's all talk. At the same time, there are very few companies who will come outright and say that they do not do user research, because especially if it's a B2B company, it's working, or B2B products or services, it's very difficult to get a hold of users. So if a B2B company very coolly comes and says we do user research, that's something that I would like, okay, I'm not too sure about it. For B2C, you can ask them intelligent questions about what kind of research they did, which product it was, how many users, was it qualitative, quantitative. So you can read a little and you can ask questions back to them to see if they really do research or not, if they really have that practice or not. So not go like blindly into an interview, but do your homework and go essentially. So, okay, Nyati again. So user store. So I'll skip Nyati's question. So we'll give others a chance. She had two questions. So Sheila Sheila, is how do you manage the ethical things when you do research on forums or any digital options?
This is something that I've seen when I was talking about the partner study, right? When I was looking at informal thing, and sometimes I would feel that when I'm asking these things, there is another narrative that I speak of how the employees figure out the platform and they use it kind of in their benefit, right? And this whole question of figuring it out. So I would talk to partners when there are a lot of they keep kind of hacking the system. They install these other apps which stops the GPS and all these things. Right? So when I would ask, what's happening? There are people there are other partners who would share this thing, and they would say, "Sir, please, I'm telling you, but please don't tell my friends I told you." The kind of trust is important. Then it's ethics wise, if you're looking at privacy, make sure the person knows you're going to quote the person later or call out the name, or if you want to have recording, please be very honest about having that recording done. And as long as it's not very personally presented, I think it should be fine.
Yeah. So Sanchita saying, she really liked the session and it was quite insightful to her. She had a quick question. How do you finalize that you are done with your user research? Like, how do you track that? And is there any matrix where one can have a check, as information is like ocean, like defining
So
metrics in user research essentially.
there are two ways to look at it. I would say, as a researcher, you would always be curious, right? Like what is there behind this? But when you add a clear factoring the company goals or the business goals or the resources or the time, you have to set clear milestones for that project, and you should also have an idea how that insight is going to add to that specific timeline or that product at that timeline. But I agree, the whole curiousness behind things will always be there for you as a researcher, but you have to limit your studies for the goals that you've set up when you started.
Yeah, so Sanchita, you can have like a tangible matrix at the beginning of your user research and see, how the information that you collected from user stories or, any data gathering protocol that you follow, right? Like how does it rate against your matrix? So, at that point, you can probably say that, you have some statistical significance of your user research. And, that's one of the ways to track, to define some endpoints, some matrices around the things that you want the data for. One final question we have. Okay, so there are many coming up. I think we're running out of time, but there was one interesting question is, how do you, it was an insightful session, but, it would be more interesting to see how do you connect the dots from Swaraj.
Connect the dots in the
So
sense.
I would, from what I think is connect the dots as in, how do you take this and then inform your design or inform your product? I think, that's probably what he may mean, connecting the dots, because it's like, we are talking about the first part of a user experience design cycle. So, if user research is one, how does this whole thing inform the next stage, connecting the dots? I hope I understood it correctly.
Another aspect is the comprehension, right? You understand that people are not sure how to use or how to navigate, right? You got
Yeah.
those stories kind of thing, and you can look at the existing product and see where is it breaking, right?
Mhm.
Or you can look at, oh, is this an opportunity to add few more things? Could we add a help section, or should we look at the existing product? So and that has to be validated with the business goals, but still I think that's one way to go about it, I would say.
Okay. One last question. We have 2 minutes and we need to wrap up. So Mahendra, would like to know how much technical capabilities as a product leader must you have as a percentage, say 40% or more, in technology such as data science or UX or UI, etc.
I'm not sure I might be the right person. I don't have that kind of experience.
So Mahendra, typically, even as we as designers, right, Akash or myself, we definitely have, I would say, to be fair, 80% of UX and UI knowledge and 20% of the remaining, the technologies or some data science or product capability or product leadership, product definitions as well. So, if you kind of turn that scale, then, 80% of your knowledge is going to be as a product leader or a product owner, and then the remaining 20% should be split across the other functions that are there in your organization, just so that nobody can take you for a ride essentially. So there is no fixed percentage. I would say that as long as you are aware of the different functions in your organization, it should be fine. So Akash, we would like to award you a certificate of appreciation, for all the participants. And Akash, we have a Hall of Fame page. So all information about Akash as a part of IPL can be found over there. Different ways to connect with him, to talk to him more, get information. All of that is available on our Hall of Fame page. You can find it on our website, www.productleadership.com. So feel free to like jump on the website at any time.